Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
It made me feel alive in loads of ways, and it also made me feel really numb in lots of ways. It was kind of existed at the same time, which obviously doesn't make sense in any sort of like real way, but that's what it feels like. It feels like the most alive you've ever felt, but also the most closed off you've ever felt.
Content warning. This episode discusses death and self-harm, which some listeners might find upsetting. My name is Halina and this is the A Sonic Hug podcast. Over the coming months and episodes, you will hear the voices of people from different walks of life who deal, experience and battle mental health issues. I spoke to Leyla on this podcast about grief. Leyla is a character. She exudes a curiosity and portrays a strength at times, perhaps from her career in performance, that you immediately admire. We all have shown dimensions to our characters, and Leyla's account here is so personal and important that it shows the different stages of grief and some of our coping mechanisms. Grief is so complicated that it can highlight other areas of your life that perhaps need attention. She explores that here, and whilst it may instill a fear for some of us of what's to come, it more importantly breaks taboo. This is Leyla's story.
I am Leyla Jospehine. I am a performance poet, theatre maker and screenwriter from Glasgow, but currently residing in Prestwick. I've never really lost anyone close to me apart from my father, who died in 2011. He had been ill for some time. He'd had several different things going on. He'd had 2 strokes and a heart attack and a cataract, but he actually died by drowning in Troon Harbour. And I remember, and I've made a lot of work actually about the moment that I found out that he had passed away. I was at work at Platform and I got the call of a cousin who thought that I already knew and was like crying on the phone, but she hung up on me when she realised that I didn't know. And then I called my mum, who called Dad's work, and it turned out that he had been found in the water at Troon Harbour. And I just remember going outside for a cigarette. I smoked at the time, and just like trying to prepare myself for what I was going to have to like start coping with. And somebody drove me home, and I went to my front door, and I just remember like seeing my dog, and like just like as soon as I saw my dog I just started like weeping, because it was just like a total trigger for me, and I was just like, oh, can't believe this has happened. But yeah, that's probably the most vivid memory, because I think anyone that's gone through grief, like those 2 weeks after, or that week after, where you're just running up to the funeral, it really just feels like you're running on adrenaline, and a bit like you're walking through space. It's very, very strange feeling. And actually everyone that I've spoke to since who's going through that moment is always like that period between the funeral is just like such a strange time. I was 19 when it happened, and I was still quite a young 19-year-old. Some 19-year-olds I meet are just super mature, but I wasn't like that at all. I just moved out of my mum's house like 3 days before. I just had an abortion. I just broken up with a boyfriend at the time, so I just totally lost control. I just was partying a lot. I got time off uni, so I was off for a full term, so it was just like partying like 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes 5. Like it was just ongoing, and it's quite funny because it was some of the most fun I've ever had in my life, but it was also, you know, probably some of the most loneliness, and I lost loads of weight really fast, and I was just sort of trying to grab on to like good experiences all the time. Like I wanted to be meeting loads of new people, I wanted to be clubbing, I wanted to be out and about, but it was like those moments of stillness that would come, you know, in midweek evenings or whatever, that it would just feel like, 1, you'd be on a come down, 2, you'd be worried, 3, you'd be like dealing with this kind of weird grief thing going on. So I mean, it really, it made me feel alive in lots of ways, and it also made me feel really numb in lots of ways. It was kind of existed at the same time, which obviously doesn't make sense in any sort of like real way, but that's what it feels like. It feels like the most alive you've ever felt, but also the most closed off you've ever felt. I've had to deal with a lot of things around grief, but I'm not sure if it made me more sick or unwell, but it definitely made me more aware of my health. I think I've always had self-destruction kind of tendencies. I've always probably drunk and partied to kind of numb myself. I've always, you know, gone with guys I probably shouldn't have gone with. I've always had like probably quite a complex mental health needs, but I definitely have been way more aware because of the grief. And I think people wanted to talk to me more about things, and it was a good excuse to go to therapy. I went to therapy maybe like a year and a half, 2 years later, and that was really good, because actually after the first couple of sessions you don't really talk about the grief, you talk about everything else that's come with it. I definitely had some issues to deal with like years later, and I don't know if they're connected to the grief or not, but I definitely was for a phase of about 2 years was self-harming quite badly, and well, not too badly, but it was definitely not a normal thing to do, but it felt like this kind of like, I felt invisible after a while. I felt like, because I suppose you go through a time where everyone is talking to you and talking through all your stuff with you, and then, you know, it's 3 years later, 4 years later, and then there's just like, there's no talk of it. Like, it's like that person never existed. And, you know, other things come up like job stuff or relationships, or, you know, that trigger these feelings of feeling like invisible, or like that your story or your process isn't seen. So I wonder if it was a coping mechanism for that, or I'm not quite sure. I've not really worked through it, but obviously I've not done it for a couple of years, so it feels like it's probably, you know, it's tied in with how I'm feeling mentally well. I feel like it's definitely, you know, this is the 7th year after Dad has died, and I definitely feel at this point that it feels easier. It really does. And those moments of feeling, you know, like huge ebbs of grief, they're not as current. They come less frequently, I think. And it's funny because they come up in like little ways. Like, I remember the first time I had a real, I don't know, not a meltdown, but I was just like, it's the moments that you miss them. So like, I remember coming back from the airport. I was seeing somebody in Ireland, my family in Ireland, and coming back from the airport and being like, oh, I'm going to have to get the bus home. And it's just like, usually Dad would have come and picked me up, and that was the moment I was like, oh, I'm missing him from that. Like, graduating uni, that was like another big thing. His 70th birthday like came and went. So those are the moments where you feel, and obviously anniversaries are really hard as well, and those are the moments that kind of creeps back up on you when you're not quite noticing. I think also with age, I've just become way more manageable with, you know, like healthy things. Like, I do meditation, I have a therapist, I have things in place, but I also never want to shy away from those moments, because actually I feel like if you don't have that big cry or have that moment of, you know, despair, or, you know, writing it out like a teenager in your diary or whatever it is, like, you don't process it, and there's a reason that those things are coming up, and you always feel like you're over it, but actually you're always working with it, and the more and more you put it down, the more and more you'll never work through it. So I don't ever shy away from those moments, and I've never shied away from death, actually. And, you know, I think that makes me quite good in a crisis. If anyone else is like going through anything like that, like I don't shy away from it. Like, I'm quite probably more interested than I should be in talking about it, and actually I find it fascinating, and I'm not scared of it in any way. But now, you know, maybe back then I was doing a little bit more self-destruction. And sometimes I wonder if it was an excuse for the self-destruction. You know, I wonder if it was just the perfect being like, I'm going to get away with some more stuff just now, and the romance of it. Like, I remember, like, I've always been obsessed with films and TVs and songs or whatever. I love dramatic stuff. So when Dad died, it was like I knew the script. It was like, I know how this works. I've seen it 1,000 times in films and TV. So you almost act in what you've seen, and then your real grief creeps up on you in like loads of unusual ways. So, you know, it's very hard to pinpoint what was grief and what was like fun and partying and joy, because actually death does this amazing thing where it just like heightens joy. It makes everything way more exciting and different, and you're like, oh, this is what life is. Like, I've just found out what death is, so like this is life. And actually, even though that sounds quite, you know, dramatic and cheesy, like, you know, I remember somebody once said to me, this amazing woman that I worked with, who was an asylum seeker, and she says you had to make a companion out of death, and the earlier you learn that, the easier things are going to be for you. I feel like I love talking about death, so like I'm totally up for making other people feel comfortable, but I suppose your funeral is like your most common time that you have to put on that face. Like, my dad was such a ladies' man, like I cannot explain how much of a ladies' man, and there must have been about 10 women there that were all just like, oh, your dad was the love of my life and all this. And this woman came over to me and my mum, and obviously we're quite drunk at this point, like nodding on. And me and my mum are so much closer now because of it. And she's just like me. She just does not shy away from hard questions in life. But this woman comes over and she's like, introduced herself, and it turns out she's flown in from China. And we were like, oh, like, that's amazing. Like, how did you know Dad? And like all this. And she was like, oh, well, you know, we used to go out, but he's called me ever since. Like, he calls me once a week. He calls my mum once a week. I've not told my husband and my 3 kids that I'm here. I just wanted to come over. And she was like, did he talk about me? And me and my mum just looked at each other, and we were like, yes, all of the time. Like, never heard of her in her life. Never at all. So there's like, you do try and comfort people, and you try and justify their experiences and stuff. I feel like the people, like, because I was quite young, my friends definitely shied away from talking about it because they hadn't ever had anything like that happen to them. And I remember feeling quite let down by them, but actually looking back, thinking about how young we were, like, of course they didn't know how to support me through that. And actually, if I didn't have such a strong family, you know, how well we can talk, I really do think it would have been really difficult, because you do start to feel like an alien, and people look at you like, oh, that's the girl that this has happened. And I always try and, like, when I think the best thing to do if someone that's going through grief is to, like, I suppose, like, always ask like open-ended questions. And I think in our culture, we find it quite difficult to be empathetic. And I don't say that we're not kind. I think we're kind, but Brené Brown says this great thing about how you have to be empathetic. You have to actually go to quite a dark place yourself and able to, like, acknowledge people and make them feel seen. And sometimes I think we're prone to being like, it's going to be okay, or, you know, everything is fine, and all that does is make the person feel and their experience feel unseen. So it's all about being like, I see this, like, I can imagine what this feels like for you, and, you know, we're just going to talk about it rather than me telling you what your experience will be or should be right now. So I do think, and I think, you know, Scotland's, we're not good at talking. We have been taught for a very, very long time that emotions are not done, and I do think that we are learning, but we still aren't experts in, you know, how to communicate with other people without putting our own opinions on them. I think because I have made 2 shows about grief. I just love making shows about grief. Those are the moments that it comes up and I realise that I've not processed something, or I'll find something of Dad's, or I'll have a memory, or sometimes I feel like something happens that's like really connected to him. Like, but there has been times where someone said something, or I've felt something. to be honest with you, a lot of the times where I see drowning on TV, I find that really triggering, or in films, I find that really, really difficult. Sometimes I just have to shut my eyes or have to like leave the room or whatever. And those are like, that's kind of the most visceral thing that I experience that I do feel quite triggered with. And yeah, sometimes like family stuff, if someone comes back into my life, I don't have that much touch with my family, but I do miss them. And I think that actually I don't give myself enough credit for that, because my relationship with him was quite complex. When he died, we weren't in a good place. We weren't really talking. We'd had a really big fight, the biggest fight we'd ever had, like 3 weeks before he died. And it was because I was moving out of the house, and he didn't have a part in that, and he liked to have control of several things. But really it was because, you know, his little girl was moving out of like her mum's house, and actually he wouldn't have seen me and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, mum ended up throwing him out, and we weren't really a big fighting family. There was lots of undercurrents of like shameful, bad, like cheating and stuff, but we never had like full out fights. But this was like a full out fight. And we didn't speak for 3 weeks. And then I'd gone out on the Saturday night. I'd gone to see Bon Iver, of all people, and I'd stayed up all night and like gone to a workshop the next day. And then after the workshop, I just got this feeling. I was like, I'm just going to call my dad. I just like feel like calling dad. So I called him, and we didn't make up or anything. I was just like, oh, do you want to go for lunch on Wednesday? And he was like, yep, that sounds good, where will we go? And then we arranged it, and then hung up the phone, didn't say I love you or anything like that. And then it was the next morning that he was found dead. So I did feel like in that moment there was definitely someone looking out for me, some sort of spirit vibe. So I'm glad I had that conversation. But sometimes I do feel sad that that's how it ended, and that's how, you know, we finished things, and that was like the end of our relationship. But in terms of things creeping back up, things like objects, and, you know, when we cleared after all that big fight, like we cleared out his car, and he had all these like new plates and cutlery that he'd bought for me, like for my new house, as a kind of making up thing, I suppose. So it's like every time I have my cereal, I just like have a nice thought of him. But they're mostly nice thoughts, I think. I've never been a very strong swimmer. I have quite bad nightmares, but it's like certain types of water. Like I don't. So Dad drowned in Troon Harbour, and that sort of water, like murky water that's like oily and stuff. Like he used to work a lot with boats, and I actually fell in the Clyde when I was like 7 when I was with him. So I've like been quite nervous around that sort of water for quite a long time. But like with the sea and stuff like that, like I feel, you know, very relaxed. I love the sea. I've moved to the sea. My dad was always around boats. We were always like, that was his work, so we were always, you know, around it. He worked with work boats, and I was always at the shipyard, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, water was the right way for him to go. Like he'd been in the Navy his you know, since he was 16, and he travelled the world, and the fact they never learned to swim is absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, it was kind of like this, you know, beautiful kind of ending for him, because, you know, he was sick, and he could hardly walk by the end of his life, and to watch him in a hospital, that wouldn't have been nice. Like, it's annoying that we didn't get to say bye, but like, what a beautiful ending to a man that spent his life on the sea, is that he gets to go back there. And actually, like, I think about sometimes, like when I'm like paddling in Prestwick or looking out my window and I can see the sea, I'm like, oh, you know, this is like, that's my dad. Like, there's parts of my dad in that water. So you do change the framing of it slightly. And, you know, people get really shocked when you're like, oh, he drowned. They're like, but it was like the perfect way for him to go. And it was probably quick. And that was, you know, that was a good thing. You know, there'll be loads of times that it's really hard. Like when I have children, like my partner now, He's never met him, like all those kind of things. Having a work that fulfills me is like one of the most important things. I can feel like if I have time by myself and I'm not doing anything, I can really slip back into depression like very, very quickly. And I think that's the nature of my work as well. I'm used to like high paced, like being around people, communicating with people. So whenever I step back, it become like that kind of like quietness is a real trigger. So if I see 2 days where I've not got anything booked, I have to put something in. So whether that is going to the gym or going for a run or doing a yoga class or whatever it is, I need to like, or meeting a friend or whatever, I need to put that time in. And I'm not an expert at it. Like sometimes I do go for days because I'll give myself writing weeks that actually I need to think about is not useful for me, because as soon as you get into your head, you do start slipping a little bit. So being around people is really important for me, and also the meditating stuff I should do more often, but even just being aware of those moods and like being able to like check in with your brain when your brain is creating a narrative that's not necessarily true, and being able to stop those negative thoughts and like rethink. It's definitely been easier with having a stable partner and being in touch with my mom and all those kind of things, but I mean above all, therapy was the thing that really straightened me out. Like I can't recommend it enough, and I'm in a very privileged position and I know I can afford it, which is just I couldn't ask for to be in a better position. So that's been really useful, and I'm so grateful for that. But even if it's choosing between a therapy session and a night out, like I would say to anyone who's thinking about it, is that just go for the therapy session, because even though it's a lot of money, there's no bigger investment than in yourself. Like you'll never regret it. And also a lot of people I know, like they've gone once, they've not had a good experience and they've never gone back. And that's really tricky, because it is hard to find someone that you like. It's hard to meet anyone that you like, never mind someone that you have to tell everything to. But it is, I found it invaluable actually. And I suppose it gives you tools to be able to deal with stuff, and also just to be able to lay out all the thoughts that you're having in your mind constantly into some sort of jigsaw that you can start piecing together. Is just, yeah, I just don't know where I would have been, and that is because I had a safety net. I've always had a safety net, and I've worked in lots of different social groups, but I've worked in prison, and a lot of the young men that end up in prison have lost someone, or have had a trauma, or like a grief, and actually it's because they don't have the safety nets that they end up in prison, or worse, dead, or whatever it is. And actually I'm so grateful for having family and a good support system, and that's why I think it's really important that we create these good systems around the more vulnerable, because grief happens to everyone, and why is it only like the privileged that get the coping mechanisms? I think that the waiting list for the NHS psychiatrists are just too long. I just think that it's mad. Like, how can we up it? Like, how can we make it that if you lose a parent under 16 that you have to go for 4 sessions, or you have to do all these things? Like, mental health has to be like a maintenance, rather than you don't go to it when things are like really bad. You have to go to it regularly for it to make sense and for it to help people. So I do understand a lot of people are like, we all have to be there for each other, we have to talk to each other. Like, I understand all of that, but actually we need to put pressure on the government to stop cutting these really vital services, because actually you can talk to someone but you're not qualified to talk to that person. Like, it's like you go talk to somebody and you're like, okay, I've finally opened up, and that person actually doesn't know how to handle it. They don't know how to protect themselves, they don't know how to protect you. I mean, like, how many of my mates would be like, oh, let's just go get drunk, and then in a way you're like, thank God, like I get to numb it, I get to have fun, like all works. But they are not qualified. They'll tell you what you want to hear, and actually sometimes grief makes you an arse, and you actually need to be told something you don't want to hear. Maybe it's not therapy, maybe it's like group classes or whatever it is, but it needs to be like something. And I just feel, I don't know, I just feel quite tired with the NHS system of mental health. Like, it just feels a wee bit not twee, but it just feels a little bit like slow, and it's not quick on the uptake. And actually grief happens so fast that it needs to be a quicker system. And that goes for all mental health, not just for grief.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
That was Leyla's story. I've never experienced grief on this level, and I'm so thankful to Leyla for articulating her experiences, which has made me understand this a bit more. One of the points she makes that really stood out for me, and one I'm also fearful of identifying with when it perhaps arrives, are those of self-destructive tendencies. I am sure there are many of us who steer ourselves down that road when things become difficult. The means to block out what we think we can't cope with and don't want to deal with further because the pain is almost too much to bear. The fascinating explanation that Leyla gives about polarising feelings, those where she partied to try and keep hold of or grab onto good experiences, but the flip side of when those episodes ended and those quiet, worrying times where thoughts creep back in, almost as if there's no balance. She talks about the dual existence of being so incredibly alive and numb, which listening to feels difficult to understand for people like myself, but I'm sure many who have experienced grief like this will identify with. Her notes about death heightening joy and the excitement about life and the discovery of it feels incredibly beautiful when she expresses it. Her positive experience with therapy must be noted. You may initially go to address what you feel is the reason for your struggle, but it ends up being a crossroads of your life, and other paths of difficulty have led to this point and amplified your struggles. Her comments on the importance of speaking to someone qualified and how vital it is for everyone, not just the privileged to have access, is notable. Leyla's outlook provides comfort and clarity for others listening. Even though her journey has been so painful, she's an inspiration. Despite unimaginable pain and surrounding loss and complexities within the relationship, she still has deep fondness for someone who's no longer here. And when she says not to put things down as you will never work through them, will no doubt resonate deeply with many. If you have experienced or experiencing anything described in this episode, you will find support information in the text with this podcast. A Sonic Hug podcast is recorded, produced and edited by me, Halina Rafai. We are also part of Scotland's podcasting network, The Big Light. Until next time, deep breaths.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.